Welcome to the talk show, Lighting the Educational Flame, with your host, Mark Hoberman. The goal of this show is to provide a learning experience to people of all ages, with guests from various fields and academics, a wide range of industries, and insight into the many forms of art, athletics, and entertainment. We hope you enjoy the show. Radio icon Shadoe Stevens is our guest today. Shadoe talks about his decades of success in radio and other ventures. Shadoe's passion for his craft is unparalleled in the entertainment industry. We hope you enjoy today's show.
Shadoe Stevens, thanks so much for being with us today. So good to have you.
It is a great pleasure. The pleasure is all mine.
Thank you. First off, I have to ask about the name because in doing some research, I believe your name was changed like on a phone call. I think you're on your way to being a DJ in Boston. And so how was the name Shadoe Stevens born?
It was thrust upon me against my will in a phone booth in Alamogordo, New Mexico. And I love to tell the story because it's very like superhero-like. Across the street, there were signs that said atomic testing range, do not enter. I stepped into the phone booth like Clark Kent, and I called Boston to tell them I was on my way. And they told me over the phone that, by the way, we can't use the name that you've been calling yourself, Jefferson K, where there's a Jess Kane here in Boston and a J.J. Jeffries. And it's just, we're thinking Drake, who was the god of radio at the time, is thinking of calling you Shadow Man or Shadow Lane. And I thought, it's the worst name I ever heard in my life. I'll have something for you by the time I get there. And I drove across country, helter-skelter, in my 67 Corvette. I'm driving 100 miles an hour through Arkansas. I'm looking at the roads going, Rodney Roads, Ronnie Lane. I'm thinking of anything that I saw on billboards or on signs or anywhere from my mind. I'm scribbling on my lap. By the time I got to Boston, I drove in. Now, I left Tucson. It was a sunny day with puffy white clouds, and it was warm. And Boston was sleety and gray and overcast and cold. And I'm listening to the radio, and I said, and starting Monday on WRKO, Shadoe Stevens. And I thought, I'm in hell. What the hell? There's no way out. And then I was lost for the next 2 weeks in Boston because Boston was built on cow paths, and there's no logic to anything, and there's no one to ask.
Well, that's almost like the shadow knows, but I have to ask you, you bring something up that's so important. What pressure there's people to go on after, there's openings, the comedian will open up for Sinatra and things like that. But what was it like for someone like you to step into the shoes of a Casey Kasem? What were you feeling? What was the emotion involved in that?
Well, there's no emotion. It was just me trying to find what I could do with what I know, because I had left radio completely. I didn't want to be in radio ever again. I had 3 huge successes in Los Angeles, creating the formats for 3 gigantic #1 radio stations. And there were so many politics and there was so much ego that I thought, well, if I'm going to work this hard, I'm going to go for something bigger. Right. And so I started my production company, and pretty soon I was doing commercials for like the Blues Brothers movie and 48 Hours and Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and like the who's who of music stars, from David Bowie to Elton John. I mean, they all came to us. Mm-hmm. And then on the heels of that, I got the Federated because I was doing radio commercials, and then I got the Federated television commercials, and they were the biggest. That was the biggest regional advertising campaign in U.S. history. They went from 14 local stores in Southern California to 78 superstores in 5 states in 4 years, all based on the advertising campaign and the leadership of a guy named Keith Powell, who was brilliant. And so, it came time to do American Top 40. I was already signed to a 3-picture deal to do movies for Dino De Laurentiis. I was already part of Hollywood Squares, right? And it had become the biggest hit in television. And that just happened like out of nowhere. There's a whole story, a backstory behind that too, as well, because the guy who was a producer was the first guy to ever put me on television in Boston. And then when I came to Los Angeles, he put me on the Steve Allen show as Steve Allen's sidekick. And then I never saw him again until mid '80s when he said, "We're bringing back Hollywood Squares. Would you help me?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do your announcing for you. And but I've got this movie deal, and that's what I want to go for." And so I do it. It becomes the biggest hit of the year. He said, "We were going to do it. We want you to be a part of it." And I said, "No, I don't want to be just an announcer." And so I turned him down. And then he came back to me again, and I turned him down again. And then he came back to me a third time, and he said, "Tell you what, we'll put you in a square.
Right.
You can do the announcing from the square. You can be yourself. You can be your personality. You can talk about whatever you've got going. If you have to go and do a movie, you'll go do it and come back and tell about it." And it was too good to be true. I mean, yeah. So I did it, and then it became huge.
Sure, because I was going to say that I remember you on Hollywood Squares, but I remember you, not just the voice, but you, Shadoe Stevens, on the Hollywood Squares. And, you bring that up, and I've been listening to your voice as so many people for as long as I can remember. Hollywood Squares radio, but the last 10 or 12 years, I think it started as Hippie Fest. My wife and I have not missed a Happy Together tour. And I can tell you, we're sitting in the audience, I'm looking for you because I hear, and I know, of course, it's taped or whatever. And I'm like, and there's the booming voice, and there's the Turtles have, and I can never imitate your voice, but the Turtles have, and Gary Puckett in the Union Gap. And I have to be honest with you, it to me is a major part of that show. That show is not that show unless Shadoe Stevens is introducing each act. So how were you first approached to be part of that project?
Oh, that's easy. When I started K-Rock, Mark Volman and Howard Kalin came to me and they said, "We've been doing a radio show on public radio or something, or cable or something." And he said, "We'd like to do one on K-Rock." And I said, "Tell you what, let's do one. And it'll be because I heard them and they're really funny together. They were just picking up on each other and they were so wildly creative." I said, "But here's the deal. I'll produce it. No song will ever be longer than 30 seconds. It'll be this assault of music. And we can do like Mexican night. And, the theme will be Mexican. So every song will be Mexican or Mexican influenced rock." And they went, and you have to come in once a week and spend the whole day in the production studio with me and do original jingles and original promos. And they said, absolutely. So our promos for that show were amazing, hilarious. And that show attracted the who's who. I mean, Keith Moon sat in there with us and passed out in his chair and fell on the floor from a director's chair. And we all tried not to laugh. And the bodyguards picked him up and everybody pretended they didn't see it and went on to celebrating. Right. And Ringo Starr showed up. He said, "I just had to see what was going on here. It's like crazy." And everybody in town, Albert Brooks was there. And I mean, the list goes on and on. So, they were also with the Mothers of Invention, the best version of the Mothers of Invention ever when they were a part of it, because they gave it really great humor. So when they said, "We're going to do the Happy Together tour, could you do the voice?" I went, "Absolutely. Just let me give it my own personality, because I think I know what you need." And so they gave me the outline of what they wanted to say. And then I beefed it up and said, "Get ready for the most fun you've ever had in your life. Imagine the most fun you've ever had in your life, and then multiply it times 10, and then times 1,000, plus 2, and all that kind of stuff." Yeah. Really silly, like 10 minutes before the show, and then 15 seconds later, 9 minutes before the show. It was like playing with time and all of this stuff. But it's just that kind of tongue-in-cheek humor that reflects what they do, because the show is the most fun you'll ever have in your life. Every act is fun. They sound exactly like the original songs. And every one of them is brilliant. And I mean, who knew the cow sills were so amazing?
I'm next to me on my left is a picture of me with the cow sills. I mean, after the show, you go over there and you have that. And we love them, and the whole Partridge Family thing, and it brings you back. It's like a time warp, and but I love the fact that you're so multifaceted. That many of these ideas come from you. That it's I don't want to demean it by saying it's not just the voice. The voice is phenomenal, but there's a big business sense behind this. And your voice is heard by over 1 billion people a week. And I also know you're a motivational speaker. So I sometimes like to delve into the, sometimes we don't know the story behind the glory. So we don't hear that enough. So what are some of the struggles that you've had to overcome? Already with the Boston story, that's a major struggle, right? That somebody's changing a name and you're like, here I am in hell. But what struggles have you had to overcome during the journey of 0 listeners to 1 billion? It's a lifetime.
Endless failure. I'll give you a couple of good stories. Here's one. I came to KHJ, the biggest station in the country, or at least one of 2, maybe. And it was my dream to work with the real Don Steele and Robert W. Morgan. And he's like the who's who. And my deal was, because I did so well in Boston, that I would come out and be a full-time fill-in guy until the next job opened up. And when they let somebody go or somebody moved on, then I would get it. Now, at that time, I did the Steve Allen Show. When the period opened up that I should have gotten, they gave it to somebody else. Going, what? And I go in to talk to him. And I say, help me understand. I'm supposed to have this deal. And you gave it to the guy who came on after me in Boston? And they said, well, we don't know whether you want to be on television or on radio. So we didn't want to take a chance. I went, well, I don't want to take a chance. I'm not going to take a chance on you and be at your whims. I tell you what, I will stay here. You don't have to give me a raise or anything. I'll just stay here, put it in my contract that I'll get the next one that comes up. Everything will be fine. They wouldn't do it.
Wow.
So I quit. Within a very short time, I was hired in their biggest adversary, KRLA. And I was hired to go to KRLA. Now, at that time, I went back to art school. I was an art major. And I was going to Art Center School, one of the best art schools in the country. And I was on the radio. Life doesn't get better. I'm in Los Angeles. So I petitioned the manager to put in more album music, because album music is what everybody I knew was listening to. And it wasn't top 40. And KHJ was already doing top 40 music. So let's be different. And he was so impressed by my research that he fired the program director and made me program director. So I was in an art class and I thought I was going to jump out of my mind. And I turned to the guy next to me. I'm in an anatomy class. I went, do you ever feel like you're going to lose your mind? He goes, he doesn't know what I was talking about. And I grabbed my easel and I walked out and I went and sat in my car and I thought, they've given me this job. I've got to figure out what it is that I'm going to do. Never went back. So I created this station and it was full of imagination and theater of the mind and 50 jingle package that I produced myself and all kinds of wild contests that were really funny. And the who's who, it had B. Mitchell Reed on in the morning and it had Brother John, the voice of the Love Network, who is the voice of God. And I mean, the best personalities in the world. We went right to the top. We beat KHJ. I still have the ratings in case anybody questions it.
I'm sure.
So then they tell me that that I needed to do some things that I knew wouldn't work and I knew I'd be blamed. So I quit. And my resignation was a drawing of a very old man with lots of wrinkles with wings. And he said, I had a vision last night and the vision said, quit, my child, there's no hope. So
I wish you had a copy machine that you had a copy of that. That is golden.
I have it.
I have it. That's outstanding.
And it's real dense and it's all written with little tiny filigree, little tiny letters, and all the S's were F's like in Old English. And I'm sure the manager went, this guy's out of his mind.
Really?
So I just now want to go back to art school. I'll just be a disc jockey. I have no pressure.
Mhm.
I just want to do what I like doing. And they hire a new guy. And within a few months, he calls me in one day and he says, I've got to let you go. I go, why? He goes, I thought he was kidding. I was like, is this a joke? It's like, I have big ratings. I'm, well known. I've got name value. He says, you're always walking around here smiling. I know you're cynical about what I'm doing. I went, are you out of your mind? I'm the only happy person in this whole building. I'm trying to bring everybody else up. I'm happy. I'm going to art school. I'm being on the radio. I like being on the radio. I talked to him for 2 hours. He decides that he has to stick with his original decision. So the accountant calls me in and he says, I hope you go out and spend all this money in the next 2 weeks, and then maybe you'll come to the meaning of life. I went, what's the meaning of life, Don? He goes, management is God. I went, oh, seriously? He goes, it's true. And he takes his finger and he pounds on the desk. They put the food in your mouth, the roof over your head. Management is God. And I feel sorry for you. Goodbye, Don. And now I left and I went and I didn't know what I was going to do. And 2 weeks later, they hire me back for more money. You can't make this up. So then I've got my eye open and I'm wooed over to K-Rock. They had a little AM station and the guy who started it said, I want you to do something like you did at KRLA, only more hip, for FM. And he said, we don't have it yet, but we're just on AM. But if you'll just come in and bear with me and trust me, do you want a car? What kind of car would you want? I went, Porsche. Got it. What color? I went, seriously? Are you serious? So he's paying me more money. He gives me a car. And I go over there and it's terrible. And there's a hostile overthrow of the company and they fire him and they fire me. And then there's a hostile overthrow back where he fires them and gets rid of all of them and puts me in charge. And then a moment later, we get the FM station. So now I'm in charge with this little staff of thrown together people. And I have to design the studio and design the format and design the log, the music, everything, the layout. And that, ultimately, again, that's a hire Flo and Eddie and really good people. And again, it takes off and it goes through the roof everywhere you go in town, but we're not getting paid. Now the guy couldn't raise any money and we're going bankrupt. And at the height of our newfound success, I had to quit. And when I quit, the whole station quit. Said, if you're quitting, we're not going to do it either. So I do my last show on K-Rock. I've told this story 100 times. I do my last show. I've got Flo and Eddie there. I've got a room full of people. We're playing loud, fast music. It's really exciting. We're going to give a big farewell. It's been a great trip. We've tried hard, but it didn't work out. Goodbye, good luck. And they turn the station off while I'm on the air. And the manager that had been hired shows up at the door and he opens the door and he says, I want you out of the station right now. And I walked over to him and I looked down at him and I said, you need to turn around and leave right now or something ugly is going to happen. And I can't be responsible. And he turned and left. And I gathered my stuff and my friends were all there and they all filed out broken. And I went and gathered my stuff and I went up to my office and cleared it out. And that's when I started my production company. And then I was wooed back to KMET. And the same kind of thing happened. Wooed in, did great, told me to do stuff that I didn't want to do, that I knew wouldn't work, and that I wouldn't do it as a moral, ethical kind of cause. Said, you're not going to make me into you. And I vowed never to be in radio again. So that's why I just did my production company.
Well, that intestinal fortitude is just unbelievable. I have to be honest with you. The last three stories you told, if I didn't know better, I would think they were either made up or they were from an insane asylum. I just,
I know.
Seriously,
It's like
because
a comic book, isn't
every
it?
time I'm about to say seriously, you say that you said to the person, seriously? So
Really?
it's mind boggling. But, you talk about all the things you've done and the creativity, as if you haven't done enough. You're also an author of children's books. And that's a 360 and beyond from radio. So what led to that venture?
Okay, that's a whole story too. Now you talk about failures and or having the rug pulled out from under you. I woke up I had 2 children, and they were pretty young, and I woke up one day saying button-sided hooey. Button-sided hooey. What does that even mean? It came out of me. I wrote it down. I kept looking at it written down, and it sounded like Dr. Seuss. I went, well, I'm good at verse. I should write Dr. Seuss. So I write, and I spend the next year writing the button-sided hooey. And it's sort of like it's sort of like an African-American Alice in Wonderland. It's full of imagination and deep metaphysical meaning. And then I hired a guy to do the final artwork, presentational artwork, and I was turned down by everybody. He said, well, it's very much like Lewis Carroll, but we wouldn't want to offend Mr. Carroll, would we? Mr. Carroll's dead. Nobody's doing Mr. Carroll. This is got some similarities, but it's wildly different. Well, it's written in verse like Dr. Seuss, and we don't do books in verse except Dr. Seuss. Right? Dr. Seuss is dead. It didn't make any difference. So now on the rebound, I decided what I need to do, because it's a very complicated, it's a chapter book for children, and that they're selling books that are 800 words, and so I go, I'm going to write a linear book, a simple linear book. And it'll be like The Little Engine That Could. I'll call it The Big Galoot. And the Big Galoot has size 42 hands. He's a kid that shows up at school. He's got these giant hands, and the kids make fun of him. And they laugh, and he says, well, I'm a galoot, but I have good luck. You can't get me down. I never give up. And as things go along, they go on an outing to the mountains, and a thunderstorm breaks out, and the kids are running for their lives, terrified. The wolves are howling. And guess who steps up to save the day? The Big Galoot. He throws a size 42 hand down off a ledge. My favorite line in the book is, but that Big Galoot poked pigeon-toed feet deep into the mud and would not be beat by forces too fierce for man, woman, or beast. As the going got tougher, his courage increased. So he keeps trying to save the day and doesn't, but he saves the day because he tried. And then all the kids want to be like him. So I have the book finished, and it is signed to Dove Publishing. We hired I did all the designs for the book and the page layouts, and then hired a Finnish artist who did brilliant artwork. Really, to this day, it stands up. It's really technicolor and amazing to look at. And as it's about to be printed, the next week it was to go to print, there was a hostile overthrow of the corporation. They fired the CEO and the president. They canceled the children's division. And for the next 10 years, I tried to get my book back. It took endless efforts. I get the book back, and my family goes, we've always loved this book. Let's put together the money to do it ourselves. Okay, we'll get it printed ourselves. We'll get it printed in China. We send a guy over to China so that it'll be perfect. We do big versions of the book and little versions of the book, and there'll be nothing to do but distribute it. All we have to go is to a distributor. So I get the books in. They're gorgeous. People love it. I've got quotes from Whoopi Goldberg and Dick Clark and Henry Winkler and I mean, like big time. I go to the distributors, and they go, oh, no. You have one book? No, if you had 6 or 8, we might consider talking to you. Excuse me? Nobody would talk to me. Nobody would do it. I tried everybody. Went to the biggest book convention in the country. So we tried to do it on our own. It failed. I did electronic versions. they failed. So I'm like the big galoot, you know, he never gives up. The whole story of this book, and it still has never been a big success, but everyone who's ever seen it gives it 5 stars. If you look on Amazon, all 5-star reviews. I mean, rave reviews. My children grew up reading this book and it's their favorite book of all time. Doesn't matter. Doesn't. In fact, I'm trying to, I've got there's a bunch of them in storage. We're trying to find a children's or a library system who would like them, or a children's society that would like them, and haven't been able to find any. The books, as glorious as they are, and I do believe they are. In fact, I've written a screenplay about the button-sided Hui and haven't been able to get that off the ground either. And the long story short of all this is this and many more tales of trying, succeeding, and failing have traveled with me throughout my career. And the reason I'm able to do so many things is because I tried so many things and failed. And you go, what else do I have to learn? Oh, I have to learn to use Pro Tools and Photoshop. And, I have to learn how to use Final Cut and Final Draft, and how to write a script. And I'm pretty good at all of them now. And keep trying things like Mental Radio, the one I have out now, is my most passionate because it really works. mentalradio.net. If anybody listening wants to check it out, it's very funny. And it has a deep underlying significance and a message of optimism. So it's funny and optimistic, and it does all the things that graphic novels do and superheroes do. It has lots of stories with that ridicule phobias. So, for example, the first jingle I wrote is a happy little ditty that's real catchy. Don't forget the world is ending. Don't forget to be afraid. Don't forget to keep pretending you've got it made. Your best years are behind you. So we're singing this happy little song, but you go, but it's happy. And so maybe I don't have to be as afraid, because things are probably going to work out little by little.
I think that's such a lesson for life, that there were so many failures and so many people above you just really could have kept you down, and they didn't. So many different aspects to you. I can't thank you enough. To Shadoe Stevens, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your passion and all the experiences. I always sign off, but I don't care how you do it. I would like Shadoe Stevens to sign off.
Well, you know, I am the eerie grin of the Shadow, your friend in the void. And I just want to say, yes, ladies and gentlemen, he's the greatest of all time. Mark Hoberman, man of mystery. In our last thrill-packed episode, Mark turned to his sidekick, Jerry, and said, Jerry, you? Don't miss our next thrill-packed adventure of Mark Hoberman, man of mystery.
Thank you. You're the best, Shadoe. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching Lighting the Educational Flame. To contact Mark Hoberman, email him at info@gradesuccess.com or visit him on social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thank you for watching Lighting the Educational Flame.